In this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast, our guest is Dr. Barbara Paldus, whose company is Codex Beauty. And in this episode, we talk about the way she manufactures products that are high quality. We talk about the basics of creating a nutrition label or the equivalent of a nutrition label for beauty and cosmetics products. We talk about growing a company across the globe from scratch, from start, and how marketing in China is very different than marketing in the United States. All right, let's jump right in to this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast. Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, your destination to hear stories of how businesses grow and scale. I'm Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media and the host of this podcast. Now, let's jump right into this week's interview. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Dr. Barbara Paldus, founder of Codex Beauty. And Barbara, creating Codex Beauty, has brought biotech to beauty and is bringing data-driven transparency to the beauty industry. Barbara, tell us a little bit about your experience, why you created this company, and what your mission is.
Sure. So you're probably wondering what a PhD in electrical engineering is doing in beauty.
Yes.
But I've been a serial entrepreneur for 2 decades. Yes, I'm that old. And by the time I was 34, I had already started 2 companies here in Silicon Valley. The first was Picaro. That was measurements and analytical systems for carbon cycles. So to put it into easier terms to understand, that's basically global warming. So looking at what's happening to our atmosphere, looking at pollution going into our atmosphere, and also industrial processes. And the second one, Finesse, that I sold in 2017 to Thermo Fisher, was making equipment for manufacturing everything from cancer therapeutics to vaccines to personalized medicine, cell therapy. And proud to say that many of the COVID-19 vaccines today are being manufactured in the equipment that we installed in 2015, 2016. So
Really?
Yeah. So to me, innovation has always been the lifeblood. And how I ended up in beauty was basically, I have a now 12-year-old son who was born with a severe allergy to phenoxyethanol. Phenoxyethanol, it's a mouthful, is a common preservative system used in a lot of cosmetic products. It's also in chewing gum, household cleaners. It's pretty much ubiquitous. And while, most of the manufacturers put less than 1% into the cosmetics, which is the European regulation, where there's strict regulation of what goes in there are people who are allergic to it. And what kind of got me on this whole journey was when I contacted the manufacturers and I was trying to figure out why on earth, J&J baby products and every other kind of product was causing him to blister. I couldn't really even get an answer. And coming from the tech world, usually if you ask a simple question, you get a simple answer. And then you can either say this is right or this is wrong. I believe the data or I don't believe the data. And then I was a big user of a lot of the luxury cosmetics. I used to travel a lot before COVID. And so I was one of these people who always went to the duty-free store. And I started asking questions. I started wondering, so I started contacting these companies. Well, what does it really do? You have this fancy claim, do you have any clinical data? Is there anything you can share with the consumers? And every time I got this same answer, which was, this is proprietary, this is confidential. And it was like, well, if it works that well and I'm paying that much money for it, why can't you tell me why it's so good, right? Why are you hiding behind this veil? And so that's when I started to, decide to go into this industry because it really needed more data, it needed more transparency. I started Codex in 2018. And really the whole point of the company and to the consumers is to demonstrate that quantitative data about every aspect of the product. Whether it's your supply chain, contaminants, the way you manufacture it, the clinical performance of the product, et cetera, your carbon footprint, the way you recycle your waste, all of that can be quantified. And why? Because if you read consumer reports, you have charts comparing the different products. So beauty is one of the only industries where that's impossible. Even on food, right? We have a nutrition panel. So why is beauty any different? And so I figured, you know what? I want to empower the consumer. I want to educate the consumer. I want to allow people to make better purchasing decisions, really get the functionality that they expect, that they might not be getting, get rid of the greenwashing, get rid of the beauty washing, and really start transforming the industry. Now, I know that's going to take a long time, but now we're here.
So that's really interesting. So is it, as a person who is nowhere near an expert in the beauty industry, what resonates with me as a consumer of lots of good, delicious food is the nutrition panel for the beauty industry. Is that your fundamental like goal here, to redefine what it means to have a beauty product?
Exactly. And I don't know if you can see here. Let me see.
There we
But
go. Hold on,
now
let's
in
make it bigger.
February,
Hold on. Yeah. Okay.
so in February, we introduced the efficacy panel, and what basically that is, and it's on all of our products. So irrespective of what product it is, so here's like one of our other collection products. So you can basically see we measure everything and we quantify everything. So the other kind of misunderstanding in the beauty industry is that consumer panels, which is like feedback, like I felt like my skin was hydrated, for example, are our gospel and our clinical data. And while they're nice, they're actually marketing studies. They're
Sure.
not real clinical studies. So what we're reporting here, for example, is we increase your hydration as measured with a standardized instrument that every dermatologist will recognize. It's called a corneometer, and it's, 11%, 18%, 30%. But basically, we say exactly how much in the study on average the hydration was increased. We'll say exactly how much, for example, your water loss was reduced. That's a great indication of skin barrier. Skin barrier is kind of your inflammation, your overall skin health. And so we measure basic parameters. How much oil do you produce? Are you rebuilding collagen? How smooth is your skin? How radiant is your skin? All of these are quantified parameters for which people have spent the last 20, 30 years developing standardized equipment to measure. So why not refer to these universal standards? And then a consumer can go, okay, I have this product that increases my hydration by 10% and it's $30. And I have this other product which increases my hydration, say, by 40% and it's $100. Okay, I get 4 times more for 3 and a little bit times the price. Okay, I'm going to splurge this time because my skin's really, really dry and I'm going to get like the one that really works. Or I don't really need it. I really don't want to spend more than $30. Okay, I'm going to make the trade-off. But at least now, right, you're making a trade-off with information rather than, deeply moisturizes. Well, what the hell does that mean, right?
Right. It's marketing gobbledygook, right?
Exactly.
And there's so, like, I think, as when I spend some time looking at how food is, what it means to have something that's organic or not organic or sugar free or whatever, like random words. As a consumer, I was fascinated to understand, like, a lot of it is not particularly meaningful, and there's like this almost like double speak of like language. It's language to make it appear a certain way, but without the requirement, the technical requirement to make it so. So are you, I mean, I imagine this fundamentally changes how the industry operates. I mean, are people,
It will.
how is this being
It will.
adopted? Okay.
So far, I mean, we just introduced it. We're definitely spreading the word about it. We're getting some great responses in other countries, in Europe, countries in China, Russia, very more data-driven kinds of countries. I think the U.S. is very much still influencer and Hollywood star-driven.
Yeah.
And again, as a scientist, I think scientists have to get better at communication, and we have to actually get out there, or our voices aren't going to be heard, because we can actually rationalize things to data again. So it goes back to data. And if you look at that food panel, now there are standardized tests that tell you the carbs, that tell you the sugars, that tell you the protein, vitamins in there. And those are now standardized tests that nobody disagrees, or they're based on scientific measurement again. And so they might say whatever they want in the marketing language, but you can look at that nutrition panel and they have to tell you how much sugar is in there. So you can actually know from that panel.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share my screen briefly, and what I can do is I can show the panel. So are you seeing my screen?
No.
You're not. Okay. What I'm trying to do here is here. Let's do this here. There we go.
Yep.
Now you're seeing it.
Yep. So that's our moisturizer. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about what we're seeing here. How should people be interpreting this data?
Absolutely. So the hydration is how much we increase the amount of water that's in the skin. That's measured using this thing called a corneometer, which is a capacitive measurement. A capacitor has this thing called a dielectric constant, which is an energy storage mechanism. Again, I'm probably talking way over everybody's head right now, but think of it this way. You can directly measure the amount of water in the skin. And so we're just measuring by how much we increase that amount of water. So in the case of the moisturizer, it was plus 11%. Mm-hmm. And the irony here is that, yeah, we have that measurement and it's great. Some of our other products are a little bit better and we can benchmark between our different products, but we have nothing to benchmark against with the rest of the industry because nobody else publishes their data. So we're encouraging the industry to start comparing because then again, you can start innovating and improving your products. It's hard if you're the only benchmark. The next one, and the reason it's gray, is the skin barrier. That's transepidermal water loss. That's the TEWL. That's measured with basically you have two humidity sensors and they measure the rate of water coming off your skin. Why is that important? Everyone has a skin barrier. Think of the skin barrier as the thing that's between you and the outside world. It's about 10 to 20 micron thick. That's roughly the third of the diameter of your human hair. Mm-hmm. So it's an incredibly thin layer that's between us and protects us from infections, protects us from sun exposure. So it's basically, that's the thing that takes the hit. If it gets leaky because it's irritated, because it's been exposed to pollution, because it's gotten sunburned, because we have a really bad diet or we're not sleeping enough. So there's a lot of reactive oxidative stress species. So you can think of those. Those are like the scam, and those are the things like, the free radicals that you really don't want in your body, they will start weakening the skin barrier. And if you think of it like a wall, that wall will start having holes and then your water is going to basically escape. So the more porous it is, that's bad because then your skin gets dehydrated. If your skin gets dehydrated, not only do you look, like you've aged, but that's also not healthy because then your skin can't metabolize properly. It exacerbates the inflammation. So you basically start going down the slippery slope. And so the skin barrier is really important. That specific collection is designed to restore it. And to scavenge all of these free radicals, to basically clean everything up, reduce any inflammation that might be in there, and let your epidermis, which is that nice cushy layer underneath the skin barrier, recover, start rebuilding collagen. So all of a sudden you don't look like, a balloon that's been deflated. Right. And then the last one is basically pores. And so that's an imaging system. So they take images of the patients' faces and they count the number of pores and they count the relative area of the pores. Now, it's important to note, people talk about, products reducing the number of pores. Well, that's physically impossible. Our pores are our pores.
They need to be there.
They need to be there for one thing. And for the other, you're not going to no cosmetic product is going to take your pores away, but your pores can be more enlarged or they can be shrunk. And so what this does is it basically shrinks the area of your pores by about 7%. Why is that important for brightness? You can think of pores, they're like, wells. And so they look dark because they look like black spots on your face. If you have a high enough concentration and they're all open and they're open a lot, then you're going to look dull. Your face isn't going to look very bright. So, and during the day, you prefer to have them closed more than open. And so this basically reduces the appearance. It reduces that area of your pores. It does not take your pores away.
I would hope so. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So that's really interesting. And so I imagine you have, what I think is really fascinating about talking to entrepreneurs and people who are putting their passion and their creators into a business is that there's usually some sort of foundational experience that people have, like you said with your child, and as a result, there's no one better than you to talk about and create content around why you're doing these types of things. And as a marketer, to me, that turns into great marketing, great opportunity to create videos, to create ads, to tell stories on social media. Because once you tell those stories effectively, people will flock to you because, it's authentic, and authenticity like plays a big role. Tell us a little bit about your journey. This business started in 2018.
Yep.
So this is your third business.
Yep.
You exited your other two businesses in mechanical engineering. Yes.
So one was in equipment for biotech, and the other one was in analytical instruments. That one's still going. It's profitable, and they're trying to decide what to do, whether to go public or sell it.
So you have a track record here. What are some of the things going into this business that you knew you wanted to do, or not about the cosmetics industry or the beauty industry, but like the practice of being a business owner? Tell us about that experience that you knew, okay, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to do things differently this time. What were those learnings?
So what I wanted to do, first of all, was set up all of our systems to be automated. So what I'm talking about there are financial systems, warehousing systems. We had done, in the previous two companies, we'd done the spreadsheet thing. Then the spreadsheet thing evolved to a very primitive ERP system. And so we were running kind of our finances off of spreadsheets and bailiwick. And it wasn't until later in the business, when it grew to about 50 million, that we ended up going through an incredibly painful exercise of putting in a financial system that it was called intuitive. It was anything but intuitive. And so getting really that right and getting something that was cloud-based was really, really important to us. So we put that in from the get-go. Then we integrated that to our warehouses. We integrated that to Shopify. And so now we're essentially, and we also wanted to integrate EDI, which is important for a lot of retailers in beauty.
What's EDI?
EDI, that's basically like an electronic ordering system where larger companies, whether that's a Skin Store or Target, basically can automatically place orders, and that automatically goes into your finance system. And then if that automatically goes to your warehouse, that eliminates human error. And so we wanted to put that in place from the get-go, even though we were very small. And so that's one thing we have implemented, and now we're really glad we have, because it gives us scalability. The other thing we did from the get-go, and it was largely also motivated by COVID, was we created subsidiaries. So all my businesses were always international. And so we set everything up from the regulatory quality certification perspective, that we have subsidiaries in Europe, in the UK. We can access the Middle East. We have a subsidiary in Singapore, Australia, and and China. So, I mean, we're basically set up globally. So as we're doing the marketing now, we can regionalize it. And then with COVID, different countries would go into restriction mode. So it was actually incredibly helpful, because we would always focus on the countries that were open, and the other ones that were closed, we'd be very digital. And so it allowed us to grow and continue basically developing new products during the pandemic. So it was great to have that redundancy.
And what are the key factors? Like, what do you focus on in the first 1 or 2 years? So 2018 to 2019 ends into 2020, you have COVID. So the world changes March of 2020. And for you being international, you see some of that at the beginning of 2020. So I'm really trying to distinguish, what is your business? How do you grow your business in the old world, as it were? And then what shifted when COVID happened?
Right. So we started by saying, okay, the first 3 years, we're going to be developing technology. So we've had a very, very heavy investment in developing not only our preservation system, because we wanted to make an edible preservation system that was just as effective as some of these synthetic preservatives, which we did. That was year one, because that becomes, any cream with water in it, any serum with water in it, anything that's water-based, so not pure oils, has to have a preservation system. And so since we didn't want to use phenoxyethanol or parabens or any of these other preservative systems, we had to develop our own. At the time, it just didn't exist. So that was what we spent kind of the first year developing. And we patented it, and we got the patent issued in 2019. And then we started developing, we started kind of looking around the world for plants with specific properties. And we did this big analysis. So we were running genetic expression tests on skin cells to see what plants would have what effects, because we wanted to create like a matrix of different product lines that wouldn't cannibalize each other, that wouldn't interfere with each other, but that would solve kind of your most fundamental skin problems. So hydration was where we started. Basically, if you have dry skin, you are going to have big issues. Like basically, that's going to lead to inflammation. The next thing was, okay, you're hydrated now. pollution, exposure to sun, all that stuff that creates any kind of inflammation, which we all get as we age. That was the next one. So that's the collection we launched this year. It was delayed by COVID because it was really hard to do clinical trials during COVID. You can imagine recruiting, and we ended up in France for that with delays. And then we couldn't buy like some of the Cetaphil or CeraVe, which normally you buy at Target. There were world shortages of that last summer. So we were like, all of our team were running around various Targets to scrape together enough of these to give them for a baseline reference, because they were like, we can't buy it in France, so it was an interesting experience. Yeah. And so the third one is an oil control and acne line, which will be launching early next year. So that one is actually only 6 months late. So we kind of lost a year with COVID on the collection we were supposed to launch last year. And we kind of lost 6 months on the collection we were supposed to launch this year. And then we should have been caught up, because now, again, we have clinical test labs in the US, in Europe. We kind of have redundancy now built into our system. And then the next one will basically be a sports line for mechanical stress. And then an anti-aging line. And that kind of gives us the 5 fundamental things that affect skin, both body and face. And we're also leaning into sustainability, which we can talk about later. But basically, that was the 5-year plan that we started out with in 2018. The hydration line we launched in 2019 was on schedule, then kind of COVID hit. And so now we're just catching up on the delays that we've had because of COVID. But again, the more we're kind of behind COVID, although I'm still worried about another wave in the fall with Delta. But at least now we kind of know how to handle it, and we know where to be, and in terms of retail. So hopefully it'll be easier. So I'm just saying, so we're on our 5-year plan. Revenue wise, I would say we've shifted far more to DTC than retail. A lot of our retailers, like we were supposed to open up in Bergdorf's last year, and there was one store that was left that wasn't shut down by COVID, and it ended up being shut down by COVID for 3 months. So we just basically learned to take the lumps. To stay mostly online. And I think that was the experience of many, many other startups and retailers.
And do you believe that push to direct to consumer is going to be your focus in 22 and 23?
I think so. And unlike a lot of other brands, I think we're going to now be trying to keep that balance. We definitely are still talking to retailers, and we want to be in physical stores because there is an experience in beauty. I think that is very valuable. So you definitely want to stay in retail, but we are never going to let go of our DTC. That's the backup plan to the backup plan.
And when you think about DTC, how do you drive attention for your business? I mean, you have a robust like Instagram page, and you have 29,000.2 followers. What are the advertising and marketing channels that really drive your business forward?
So I would say that in the last year, and this is partly because there have been a lot of new beauty companies, like the beauty space in the United States is incredibly crowded. And so Facebook and Instagram have become quite expensive. In fact, the cost for your average beauty brand have gone up 2 to 3 times. So we've been looking to diversify channels as well. I mean, a lot of people have looked at TikTok. Other people are looking at Twitter. Some companies are even looking at LinkedIn. So I think there is diversification across the different social media platforms. There's also Pinterest and others. So I think right now our main diversification is into the Chinese market. Because that is such a massive market that we can't ignore. And a lot of the indie brands are just starting to get in there. And so we want to get in there before there's too much noise.
For a company that doesn't have a footprint in China, but has a direct-to-consumer brand, what are some of the learnings from that experience?
It's a completely different culture. And so Instagram ads that you would never, ever, ever publish here, with a cute little sponge or a cute little cloud or a chicken or, just the cutesy kind of things you see, like Hello Kitty is huge, right? Mm-hmm. So but you would never think of advertising here with Hello Kitty. Like you have to have a mascot, for example. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a mascot, you don't have a key part of your brand. And so one of the first questions was, what is your mascot? And we're like, what do you mean? Like, we don't have
That's
a mascot.
amazing.
We're a science-based company. They're like, you need to be cute. You need to be cute to the customer. And we're like, what
Why?
are we going to pick, right? What on earth could be our mascot? So
What
our
did you
mascot,
choose?
it's a cell. Our mascot is now a skin cell, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay. A very moisturized, luscious
a
skin cell.
happy skin
A
cell.
happy
Exactly.
skin cell.
Exactly.
Okay. And do you have like different people working on your China strategy? Like, how do you make decisions about that?
We've had to build out a completely new team. We've had to basically, and again, any platform, like there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram, there's WeChat, there's Taobao, there's, Tmall. So it's again, completely different. Everything is done in local language. So you have to have, you basically do have to have that, in your back pocket. You have to find the right partner. Then you have to find the right Tmall partner. Then you have to find all the right partners for Taobao, for WeChat, and it's all different. And then it's a whole different set of influencers.
So,
And there's
so
this thing called Little Red Book. And so you have to get yourself on a Little Red Book.
So when you're making, do you have someone in? So I imagine like you have the internal liaison inside your organization that manages that. Like, do you
I
hire
have a
that
former
help?
sales manager from my previous company. So he's in Shanghai. So
Mhm.
he's running Codex China. So I'm
Okay.
very lucky that I have feet on the ground. So we kind of have people in Singapore, and then we have him in China. And then
Mhm.
over time, I can bring back some of my old team for my previous company because they're people I trust, they're people I know. And so as soon as we kind of get everything sorted and organized, and then now they've changed the laws for, you don't need animal testing, but that's a whole different set of documentation that we have to get. So maybe our goal is by next year to actually be able to be in physical stores in China. Right now, we're kind of scouting all the duty free and be on the ground, but not on the ground kind
Sure.
of stores. And so it's been an interesting experience. There was also a question about Google discovery ads. Yes, we absolutely do SEO. That's been more effective for us, to be honest, than
Of
Facebook and
course.
Instagram.
Well, yeah, if you do it right, if you have the patience for SEO, it pays lots of dividends. And is a lot of that work handled in house? I mean, if you have the money to pay for people, you should, right?
So
Or
we've through trial and error again, and I'm not going to say we had any kind of magic bullet here, but through trial and error and going through multiple agencies, we finally landed on some great agencies that we work with, and we've had to kind of restart 3 times. Again, just being completely honest and direct here. We didn't get it right the first 2 times. Now we're finally with partners who, interestingly, give us data. They give us analytics. They give us reports so we can really start seeing, okay, if we modify this ad or we modify these words, what is the effect? What truly is happening? Before that, we were getting verbal feedback or kind of more general feedback. And so you really didn't know what to tweak or what to do in order to improve your performance. Now, again, we found agencies that give us the raw analytics. They give us, massive graphs, charts, all of that. And so that's really helped us start adapting our strategy.
I love that. And especially being data-driven folks, right? Like, why wouldn't you get the raw data? That's the best thing you guys can have. Okay, so for 2022, you're launching a new oil.
We're launching an acne line. So
Acne
for
line,
oily
okay.
skin. So basically sebaceous skin, skin that is overly oil producing. And oftentimes that and acne are correlated.
Very cool. So, Barbara, tell us how people can find you and Codex Beauty.
Sure. They can find us on www.codexbeauty. So one word, CODEX, beauty.com.
Very cool. Barbara Paldus, founder of Codex Beauty. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the LA Business Podcast. If you like what we're doing on this podcast, please consider subscribing on Apple or Google Play, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations for a guest you'd like to hear on this podcast, please email me, robert@brillmedia.co. Thank you. Have a fantastic day.